This morning I'm talking about the law of renunciation. Sounds like a very boring topic. It does. But it is my hope that at the end of the talk this morning that you're going to realize that the law of renunciation is a gift, and that this is something that we really should put into spiritual practice. And if for nothing more, to release the soul, our unfolding human soul, from attachment to all things that are unnecessary, and to release ourselves from the control of these objects and things that we're so attached to release control from our life. So it is important. Let me start with the story. There's a story about a Greek man who is trying to solve a geometrical problem. At that time, his country was under attack by the Persians. So here he was trying to solve a problem. And what happened is that this Persian soldier came and attacked him. "Please," he said, "don't kill me until I solve this problem." But the soldier put the dagger into the geometrist's back, and he was dying. So as he was dying, he said to this soldier, and this is the point, he said, "You can kill my body, but you cannot take my intellect." It's so powerful. So what he was doing is that he was renouncing his body, but he did not have to renounce his intellect. Because, and listen to this, all true achievements are part of our true self. All true achievements that we engage in throughout our entire life are part of our true self. Our true self is the divine self, right? When our divine self unfolds, it manifests as achievements. It's not imitation. It's not, "I'm better than you are and I have more than you do," and it's not a process of collecting and accumulating things. It is the process of manifesting all that we have been promised as we come into incarnation is our potential, and that potential is infused in our true self. Our job, our challenge is to manifest that potential. So, in general, we see humanity, let's say an average consciousness, is trying to imitate other people. They're trying to collect and accumulate things that really are not part of their divine potential. And so when they come to the end of their life, they feel frustrated, they're afraid to die, they're afraid to pass on. So life for them has been a disappointment. But when we find this path of self-achievement, this path of unfolding the potential that is fused and yet hidden within our true self, that's when life becomes a life of joy. It becomes a life of principle. And it becomes so beautiful that to renunciate that which has control over us is the easiest thing possible to do. Because that then, the things that we're releasing are in fact our burdens, because these burdens have had no significance to the potential of what our achievements in this life were to be. All that we have will go, and all that we are will remain. All that we have will go, and all that we are will remain. And this is one of my favorite phrases. You see, it is not who we are, but whose we are. It is not who we are, but whose we are. What does that mean? It means we are part of the most divine. We are part of the Master's heart. We are part of the ashram. It's not who we are, but whose we are. All that we manifest of our divine self belongs to the Most High. It belongs to the Creator. All that we are not, all that is unreal, must end. And in the end must be renounced. All of our achievements, those achievements that are part of our true self, will remain. Remember, every human being has a divine origin. This is something we've talked about the last couple of Sundays, so I'm not going to elaborate on it. It's just except to remember that there is a mechanism within our being that is of divine origin. And the minute we make contact with this divinity within is when we ignite the potential of that divine self, and our consciousness takes a shift, and we begin to live life in a real way, and we let go of the imitations and living a life of being asleep. So renunciation. Renunciation is a law, and this law has been in effect since our divine spark turned northward. When the spark began striving upon the path of evolution to home, that's when this law began. So it didn't begin in the involutionary process. That's what I find interesting. It began when the spark turned northward, which means when our evolutionary process began. In the Letters of Occult Meditation by Alice Bailey, it reads, "Let a man deliberately realize that he is a son of God, that he is a son of God, and that he is returning to the Father, that he is God himself, seeking to find the God consciousness which is his." She goes on to say that we are the lower aspect of divinity seeking alignment with the higher. So that was from Letters on Occult Meditation. This begins to reveal to us that as our divine spark has turned northward, is on this path of evolution, that we are going to move forward in stages of evolution, and these stages are called initiation. So on the path of initiation, on the path of discipleship, and on the path of perfectment, it is through renunciation. We can't get away from this. It is through renunciation that we will eventually enter what is called the fourth initiation. This fourth initiation is called the Great Initiation, or Great Renunciation, or Crucifixion. So that's the fourth initiation. So this is the Great Renunciation, this fourth initiation. So as we begin to renounce this little self, or as Alice Bailey was calling it, the lower aspect of divinity, we then begin to, and finally and ultimately, totally lose our self-will. As long as we have self-will, as long as we, in other words, become ego-centered, then we cannot be free. We cannot escape from suffering and pain. When we observe the nature of our self-will, I mean, if you really observe it, then we really come to the understanding, the recognition, the observation that we have hundreds and hundreds of fragmental willpowers within us and also outside of us. And these many, many fragments of the little self dominate and control us. You know, I find it's so inspiring, it's so enlightening, it's so wonderful to know about these principles in the teaching and to come together and share our joy in finding the principles. But then we run outside, get in the car, go down the road, and go back into our life, and almost too easily forget about these fragmental willpowers that are controlling us and dominating us. So life isn't going to let us get away with that. And the way I see it is, you know, life has this design for us that, okay, you get out of your car and you go in the grocery store and you meet your first test. You know, somebody really irritates you. Ah, there we go. There's a fragmental willpower that's dominating me so much that I'm full of irritation and forget love, you know, forget compassion. I just want my bread and get out of here. You know, I know. When we observe ourselves, sometimes it can be humiliating. But it is the process of observation that wakes us up, puts us on this path of initiation, and allows us to experience the process of renunciation until we finally meet our true self. And that's when this life of beauty and goodness and righteousness and joy and freedom truly begins. One of the beautiful mysteries of renunciation, and this may come as a surprise to you until we really think about it, and that is group consciousness. The teaching tells us that group consciousness is conditioned by the initiatory process of renunciation. So once we have renounced our self-will, so this is the first thing that probably the most difficult thing, the most difficult obstacle to renounce is our self-will, or in other words, the will of the personality life. Once we are able to renounce the will of the personality life, what happens is that we become one with the will of God. Now, this may sound a little boring, but let me tell you, the effect, the experience is anything but boring. Because the effect is your life begins to walk away from pain and suffering, and we begin to experience the favor of hierarchy, where we are given more responsibility because we have the skills and the talent and the value to put the plan of hierarchy into manifestation in the most beautiful and perfect way, as perfect as we can as human beings. It is then that we enter into group awareness and function as one with the great whole. So that's group consciousness. It's not being part of this group. It is truly being part of all groups, being part of the core of humanity. When our heart is aligned with and fused with the core of humanity, that's when we become fused with what we call the cosmic magnet, and with the heart of hierarchy, which we could say then allows us to have Christ consciousness, particularly when we realize that Christ is the head of hierarchy. So that's group consciousness. Now, renunciation is not taught much in this country. You may have recognized that. Or anywhere. So therefore it's not very popular, and unfortunately it's not well understood. Most especially when a person, whether it be an adult or a child, hears the phrase, "You must give this up." like Lent. You must give this up for Lent. Well, what happens is we immediately want it, right? If we have to give this up, yeah, I really want it more. We seem to want to possess what we are being asked to give up with an even greater fervor. But in essence, to renounce means to no longer be identified with what is false. So if you participate in Lent, here is what Lent can mean to you, is to no longer be identified with what is false. So, as I said in the beginning, to renounce means to reject what controls us, what enslaves us, no matter what it is. Renunciation begins with physical objects, then emotional objects, and then mental. So basically, here's our clue here. Basically, renunciation means to withdraw from the objects of our desires. Now, I haven't quite done that with my iPad yet. I'm still pretty identified with it. But one of these days, I fell down a few weeks ago and cracked the glass on the iPad, and now it's flawed and kind of ugly when I look at it, so it's easier to disidentify. But I still love what it does. Anyway, and my puppies, maybe I have to renounce my puppies still. But to renounce means to be our true self. Okay, to be our true self. When we are able to withdraw our consciousness from the objects that we not only desire the most, but also objects that are enslaving our soul, then we are already shifting our consciousness from the object of our desire to, see, there's a shift here, to the interest of our innermost self. To the interest of our innermost self, so that innermost self is that mechanism which we call the divine spark, which is part of the true self, which holds the potential of all that we truly are, really are, and that are here in this incarnation to manifest. So renunciation is an act of focusing our interests on our innermost self. To renounce what we are attached to allows us to enter into a new phase of life. Doesn't that sound beautiful? Now, if we can just expand this idea from ourselves or from our family into humanity, and imagine humanity renouncing what it is attached to enter into a new phase of life, it is going to happen if we do it. See? If the disciples and initiates of the world do it, humanity is going to do it, because humanity will follow the leadership, the light of the world. So we have an extraordinary responsibility to renounce. We need to learn how to renounce things, what to renounce, and the purpose of renunciation. In fact, we are told that the whole journey of our human soul throughout all the kingdoms is designed in a way that it learns how to renounce. So again, it's not a matter of having to be a special person in order to renounce. It means it's going to happen whether you're special or not. Okay. Buddha taught that the selfish and conceited person could not build the future because by cosmic law, that person would be outside the current of life. This is a current which carries all that exists home. So the Buddha is telling us that if we are selfish, if we are conceited, then we have put ourselves outside of the current of life. In fact, I can remember many years ago when I was studying self-realization, and I was so smitten with Yogananda. and met one of the teachers, one of his direct teachers of Yogananda. And he was talking about being outside the current of life, and I just went cold. Yeah, it would be like, to me, it's like going off into space and not being tethered. You know, not having any direction and being at the whim of the currents, you know, air currents. So, let us not be selfish and conceited. If we really believe what the Buddha is telling us, let me repeat this, that selfish and conceited people could not build the future, because by the cosmic law they would be outside the current of life, the current which carries all that exists toward home. He taught his disciples, if they were selfish, if they were possessive, if they could not cooperate with the laws of nature, they would never be part of the world community. They're very serious and yet at the same time very beautiful principles to realize. In admitting disciples into his community, Buddha required renunciation of personal possessions. This was austerely carried on into the whole of the life of the one striving for enlightenment. Once a pupil asked the Blessed One, how should one understand the fulfillment of the covenant regarding the renunciation of property? How should we do this? And he said, one disciple renounced all things, but his teacher continued to reproach him for possession. Another remained surrounded by objects but did not merit any reproach. So isn't this interesting? And the Buddha said the feeling of possession is measured not by objects, but thoughts. So one may have objects and still not be a possessor. So the idea is to enjoy the beauty of what we have and to feel a deep sense of responsibility for what we have been given, but not to let what we have been given own us, not to be identified with what we have, and not to accumulate more than we need. The Buddha was teaching that the student could have the things in his life which were most necessary to his needs and dharma, and most especially those things that would enable him to manifest his life purpose. But if the person became attached to what he was using, whether it was needed or not, then he would be a possessor. So I was thinking about it, and Olivia reminded me of this last night with her lovely gift of the candle and card wishing us best wishes for our first anniversary of having our center. And it only took us 30 years. 30 years. So I think every single one of us feel this deep sense of responsibility. But we're not going to let us own us. And those tests are already coming. But we're so aware in the tests of, I won't even go into all floods and burglary and neighbors and new gates and is trying to take our attention, away from the purpose of this sacred space. And say, no. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. That's part of the price of being a new property owner for a while. But this place has a purpose. And we're experiencing that purpose even today. But we're not going to be attached. In other words, we're not going to let the problems, deter us from the purpose of the use of such a lovely place. It seems natural to most people to believe that whatever we have or whatever he owns belongs only to himself. In other words, he is the possessor of all that he has. Like, this is my husband. He belongs only to me. These are my children. They belong only to me. This is my money, and I am the sole possessor of this money. It goes on and on. My car, my house, my knee, my mom, my dad. It just really bugs me when people say, my mom, my dad, my dad. How many moms do you have? You know, how many dads do you have? It's such a breath of air just to say mom, you know, or dad. So the beginning of detachment, even though it's subtle, is to kind of just push away my, you know, that two-letter word, my. Say, this is Paul. We don't have to say, this is my husband. This is Paul. You know, and if Paul strays away, then it's my husband. So to repeat, to renounce means to reject what controls us, what enslaves us. Buddha always advised that the possession of few objects as possible is better in order not to devote too much time to them. So here's an interesting exercise to see how attached we are to our things. So let us say you're writing with your favorite most pen. One that not only costs you a great deal of money, for example, a $1,200 Mont Blanc fountain pen, but that the one you use when you are your most creative. A beloved friend comes up to you while you are sitting at your desk and says, wow, that's a beautiful pen. And you say, here. That's renouncement. Can you with joy give your friend your most cherished pen? If we are learning the beauty of the law of renunciation and the freedom of releasing ourselves from what we are attached to. We are always to respect and care for the objects that we have, especially what we have created, however, to realize we are not the possessor. I was thinking something I forgot to bring with me, and I apologize for that, but Torquem, Serdarian's wife, Joanne, gave me a pen that Torquem used when he wrote one of his books. And what I was going to bring was a pencil. I've got this little pencil that was this long, and it's a wooden pencil, and it's been sharpened over and over and over again. Well, this was a pencil that Alice Bailey used in writing her manuscripts. And she gave her pencil to Torquem, and Torquem gave it to his wife, and his wife gave it to me. So I have it in this special little box with butterflies on it and wrapped up, you know, it's so precious. And I wanted to bring it this morning, but I forgot. So I guess it wasn't meant to be. But, you know, I also have a necklace that was given to me by Helena Rourke, and it's a special necklace. It's a cloisonne, it's a pendant. It has the front and the back side of the necklace are different. There's some symbols that we don't even know what they are. Some of them we do. There's a peacock on it. The Buddha's feet is on it, and there's little symbols, and some of these symbols we just don't know what it means. But hanging at the end of the pendant is a moldavite stone and a real pearl. A real pearl. So I have these three things that are so beautiful, and they're like a talisman. But they don't control me. And it was such a gift. It's a gift that will keep on giving, because I'll give it when I move on. I'll give it back to the group. And this to me just is such a wonderful symbol of how those who took such care of their pencils, or, you know, in the case of Helena Rourke, this necklace that she designed, wanting to give it on and give it on, but not to own it. not to possess it. I think that everyone eventually at some time in their life will be called upon to renounce their ego, their little self, and in its place to think, to feel, to speak, and to act as if they are one with the self in all forms. So just as a reminder, again, to renounce means to be one's true self. So we are told that renunciation is a law, that it is a law which works. This is interesting, that this law does work mechanically until we reach a stage of discipleship where we can apply this law of renunciation consciously. Everything that we have can either limit us through our identification with it or release us through the attitude of renunciation. Are you still with me? It seems like you got it. Okay. Okay, so here's something for us to consider. Initiations are stages of renunciation. The greater initiate you are, the greater is your renunciation. It is also very true that the more a person renounces, the purer his self becomes. Eventually, the law of renunciation from the mechanical experiences to the consciously applied experiences with the universal law will enable us to awaken to the true self, to our divinity. We need to realize that in accordance with the law of renunciation, that all that we so urgently want and are attached to is a temporary appearance. All that we want and all that we are attached to is a temporary appearance brought about by the attachment of our desires from this and other lives. When in other lives and in this life we become identified with the objects of our desires, we will develop repulsion for that same object in the next lifetime. This repulsion develops to an even keener manner when the law of renunciation takes the objects of our desires away from us. So why is it? This is kind of complicated. This is a little complex until you get it, until that light shines and you think, oh, no, I get it. Okay. When this law is operating in our lives, it is very painful. Then later, the pain of the memory and the unconscious memory of our suffering causes us to be very negatively polarized. So, in the future, in next lifetimes, when we meet that object that was ripped away from us, there is that deep cellular memory of the pain and suffering, and we become repulsed. So initially, we're attracted to that object, that concept, that idea, but then the memory kicks in, and then we're repulsed. This repulsion will make the person chase after the objects of his desires, but he will never be satisfied with them. And if he acquires the object, he will never fully enjoy them. So, think about your own life and your experiences, and then you'll see the cause. You know what can you think of these experiences you've had? I sure can. It was revelation here. So, Those who serve humanity are those who instinctively or consciously work with the law of renunciation. See how the law of renunciation increases our freedom? Applying it, experiencing, putting this law into our life ultimately brings us freedom, not in just this life, but in our next life and next life and next life, to where we are no longer burdened by the obstacles of our past. And now we have the freedom to serve because we are part of the heart and the plan of hierarchy. And no longer will our negative karma interfere and prevent that service from taking place. Those who serve humanity are those who instinctively or consciously work under the law of renunciation. It is renunciation that gives us the power of the soul and spirit. So I'm almost done. This is so beautiful and instructive. Here's another question for us to answer. What is the purpose? I think we can pretty much answer now this question. What is the purpose of renunciation? Basically, it will give us the power to be our soul, to be our true self, and to give us the power of spirit. There are gifts of soul power and spiritual power, and that basically is one gift, which is immortality. So we learn about immortality through the masters, through hierarchy, through the various stories that we have read over the years about their lives and about their incarnations. And then we understand immortality, the immense mystery of how a great one can choose to come into incarnation. I think it's called, they develop this Maya Varupa body, and it looks real to us, but they can dissipate it just like that. It depends on what their purpose is and the need is for humanity to bring them into this murky planet. And then they leave. But they never die. And that's our future. So that is the gift of practicing this law of renunciation. If we do not consciously exercise renunciation, life puts us in such conditions in which we will painfully learn how to renounce. We will also realize the lessons of renunciation are going to repeat themselves year after year, life after life, with greater taxation until we learn our lessons. So take a minute and think about this law and how it has operated in your life. And then think about this. The growing child, we were all growing children. How we outgrew our shoes. How we outgrew our clothes. And how we left behind our toys and our little storybooks. Look at all the things we've left behind as we grew up. So we can already see how this law is in and has been operating in our life. And then in conclusion, the law of renunciation is the basic theme of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita instructs the soul that it is to perform action without attachment, and thereby lay the foundation of later relinquishing what can be affected without pain and the sense of loss, because we have created this power to renunciate. And that's renunciation.